we're going to just let these fine folks talk about what they're going to be focusing on agenda-wise during the session, and really this is all about you. So as they go along, please ask plenty of questions. Jared will be with the microphone, so this is, the next hour of letting them speak for just a little bit, and then getting some feedback from each of you on what's going to be important in the 2026 session. So, Speaker Hanshaw, do you want to go ahead and kick up?
Sure, happy to. Well, folks, good afternoon. Hard to believe we're here again, but Happy New Year. Happy New Year. Most of you know I live just off the Woelfel Interstate exit. It's exit 34, just north on I-79. My morning commute every day is a time I sort of use to reflect on the world, and I was thinking about this event this morning when I looked at the calendar as I pulled out of my garage to head this way. I was remembering that a year ago at this event, the moderator was my good friend Doug Scaife, and we say that term in the legislature often. We refer to colleagues as friends. We recognize people on the floor of each body as friends. Doug actually was my friend. Doug and I had been friends since we were young men in college. I remembered that this morning as I was driving down here about his role in the association, his role in the media. He believed in the press, and he believed in the power of the press to spread the message that the 134 men and women who serve in this legislature are trying to do. He believed deeply in the role of the press in spreading and educating West Virginians about the things that we try to do as elected officials. I just felt like it was appropriate to start today with that recognition. We're here, we're 64 days out from the end of the legislative session this year, and on behalf of the House of Delegates, I want to thank you for the opportunity to spend a few minutes with you today and talk about what that means to us, what that means for us. A couple of weeks ago, we said to many of you who were in the room that when we convened next Wednesday, we wanted to shine the brightest spotlight possible on growing and diversifying the state's economy. It's a subject that I've spoken about at length over the course of the 12 years now, soon to be, that I've been a member of this body, the 7+ years that I've had the opportunity to lead the House as the House Speaker, but it can never have enough attention, because solving that problem, solving for the reality of what it means to give men and women a good, well-paying job in West Virginia, is how we solve for so many other things. Earlier this week, many of you were kind enough to run a piece that I wrote that explained our, what we call, Jobs First, Opportunity Everywhere agenda. We spoke about that a couple of weeks ago on the floor of the House before we left for our December interim meetings to head into the holidays, about the things that we wanted to prioritize, the things that we wanted to focus on, and really bring to the floor of the House early and with due consideration this year, that were and are intended to do that, to deal with jobs first. Because we know that if we deal with jobs first, that if we deal with creating a vibrant and thriving economy first, we can solve a lot of opportunity everywhere for so many other things. And in the piece that many of you ran, I explained that by giving West Virginians good, well-paying jobs, we can solve for the problem of educational attainment. We can solve for the problem of substance abuse. We can solve for the problem of housing. We can solve for the problem of family unification, the breakdown of the family, the foster care crisis in West Virginia. We can solve and have the opportunity to solve for so many of those problems if we get the fundamentals correct and if we get the fundamentals right. For us, that agenda takes the form of a 3-pillar approach. And I won't rehash the entirety of the announcement that we made a couple of weeks ago, but I do want to quickly highlight once again, now that some of you had some time to cover what we've announced, what we've said before, and think deeply about what it means to create a vibrant, thriving economy in West Virginia. Our first pillar of that concept is workforce-ready education system and building the workforce of the 21st century, making sure that West Virginians have the skills that it takes to actually go to work. To us, that means things like incentivizing through appropriate compensation the teacher workforce. We did announce that we do intend to bring to the floor of the House a teacher pay raise this year. We were happy to see that the governor also has made a similar announcement. We're anxious to begin consideration of that. We want to also do things like making sure that benefits are portable. We want to make sure that young people, our students in West Virginia in the public school system, have the opportunity to gain skills that make them employable. Our Skills at Work Act is designed to do that through appropriate apprenticeships. We also want to make sure that we're providing the kind of workforce that the segments and sectors of the economy that are growing quickly, that are expanding rapidly, demand for us. For members of the House, one of the things that means for us is doubling down on one of the fastest growing segments of that manufacturing economy, and that's the aviation industry. We want to be sure that we're providing an appropriate investment on behalf of the state into maintenance, repair, and operation organizations here in West Virginia. It's an extraordinarily impactful sector of the economy already. We want to make sure that we're providing resources to allow that to continue to grow and expand in the way that so many of our communities that host small airports and regional airports in West Virginia know to be possible. Our second pillar is creating and fostering a job-creating business climate. That means putting workers first, putting workers at parity with the business, not just focusing on returns, but also focusing on workers. We want to do things like making sure that worker benefits are portable so that workers can move between jobs and advance to economic opportunity in a way that provides best for them and their families. We want to expand and expedite the ability to get permits in a timely way in West Virginia for so many of the projects that are important to us, that are important to the communities that your readership lives in. Getting a project actually commenced and started may often be the single most important step in the process of transforming an entire community. We've worked with the Public Service Commission, we've worked with the Department of Environmental Protection, many members of the executive branch to put in place those processes that have gotten us where we are today, but we really want to double down on that with things like permitting timelines, permitting shot clocks that have successfully allowed us to leapfrog a number of other states around the country, particularly here in the East, to bring projects to reality quickly. We've already spoken at length in other outlets about our Teams West Virginia concept. We intend for that to be a priority and an area of focus in the House. You cannot deny, folks, you cannot deny that our neighbors to the west in Ohio have had extraordinary success with their Jobs Ohio program. It is beyond dispute. We've spent an extraordinary amount of time learning from them. We've spent an extraordinary amount of time in conversation with Governor Kasich and his team about how that process came to be in the state of Ohio, what they learned, what they experienced, what they would do differently. And now we intend to take those lessons and deploy them here in West Virginia in the concept of what we call Teams West Virginia, technology, energy, and advanced manufacturing. We want to continue to work with our utilities and our regulated utilities to make sure that we're providing build-ready sites, that we have the infrastructure necessary on which to build, so that when we've recruited employment opportunities that can be transformative to local communities, that the sites are there for them on which to build. We know that in the 21st century economy, time is as valuable as money, and in fact more valuable in many cases when we talk about siting and growing and developing projects. We want to make sure that the infrastructure exists to do those kind of project developments in a timely way. Our third and final pillar for the concept of jobs first, opportunity everywhere builds around responsible economic growth. And note that we say responsible, not growth for the sake of growth, but rather responsible economic growth in a way that actually is transformative to the communities of West Virginia. Oftentimes, and I'm one of the people who do it, oftentimes we talk about growing our state's economy, diversifying our economy in a way that makes it sound like the prime directive there is financial and economic. Not so, not so. We talk and I talk about economic growth and diversifying our economy because getting the jobs right, getting the economy right, creates the boulder on which we can build on every other priority that we have as West Virginians. We want to do that. We want to do things like making it easier to build homes here in West Virginia. We want to advance a priority that removes as much as possible those sales tax elements on construction materials for homes. We want to do things like the Welcome Home Act in West Virginia that some other jurisdictions have had success doing, which have brought housing stock supplies up in those jurisdictions. We know that in so many of our communities, one of the biggest barriers to creating job opportunities for families and for workers is that workers have nowhere to live. There's no stock of adequate housing in so many of our communities. I see some of our industry partners in the rear of the room nodding their heads. If you recruit particularly professionals, but workers of all strata of the economy to your community, they simply have to have a place to live. And for so many of our communities in West Virginia, we've let our housing stock dwindle to the point of unavailability now. So we want to take some steps to address that. And then we want to do things that make capital flow more easily to West Virginia-based businesses. One of the things that I'm very proud of over the course of the decade that I've had the privilege of serving here in the legislature has been that we've had some extraordinary success in recruiting to West Virginia some big name employers. And some of you are present here in the room. Thank you to those of you who are here that have participated with us in the growth of our economy from outside our borders. But we also don't want to forget those multi-generational family companies, those West Virginia businesses that have been here through the long haul, that have been here in so many cases through the thick and the thin, through the good and the bad of West Virginia's economy. We want to try and make sure that they have access to the same kind of economic advancement, the same kind of economic recruitment, the same kind of capital resources that are often available to larger, more household name employers. We know that the majority of West Virginians do work for small business, and we want to do things like what we're going to call the West Virginia First Small Business Growth Act, intended to provide new capital opportunities, new capital resources for West Virginia-based businesses, West Virginia-based companies that are looking to expand. So on those three pillars, we intend to build our jobs first opportunity everywhere agenda, because we know that if we get the jobs right, if we do get the jobs first, then the opportunity exists all across the state to solve for every one of those other issues that I've addressed here today, that I addressed in the piece that many of you were kind enough to run earlier this week. So I'll be happy to talk about any of those points in detail later in the time we have together today, but at this point I'll yield the floor. Okay, Senator Woelfel.
Thank you. I'm told we each have an hour, is that right? Okay. Thank you very much for having us and having me today. First, I want to compliment the speaker on all his sharp efforts over these years on economic development. My district particularly has benefited from a lot of his hard work in Cabell, Wayne, and of course adjacent Mason counties in that region of western West Virginia. I would echo each thing that he said because I have that much respect for his knowledge on that topic. I'm going to take a slightly different approach and say maybe that I'll jump around a little bit. Some of the priorities that I personally am going to have and advocate for this session will be the 6,000 plus foster children who are in our foster care system, which we all know is broken. It's been broken. Those children are there through no fault of their own. They're there for reasons of having suffered and endured sexual abuse, physical abuse, or gross neglect. And, we can't really, in my view, fix that without resources. And Senator Tarr, another person that I have to compliment on some of his hard work, has developed and got the Senate to adopt, and subsequently the House and the governor, a triggering system for tax cuts, for income tax cuts. And we know that in a progressive income tax system, the people that are doing the best benefit the most when taxes are cut on that particular tax. It's a progressive tax. And the senator from Putnam built in triggers that will trigger these tax cuts if our economy merits that, and if our resources allow that. So I'm against any tampering with Senator Tarr's trigger mechanism, and I don't think we can afford a tax cut. There are people in the Senate and the House that they don't care what happens to, they don't care about public education. I don't mean they want it to fail, but they don't really care whether it fails or not. And there are some, frankly, that want the public school system to fail. So I'm sorry to report that, but it's a fact. So we've got to make sure that we're making some changes in the school aid formula that work for our rural counties, for our poor counties, and for our counties overall. So if we have excess funds, Governor, with all due respect, it should be devoted toward, the least among us, these foster care children, homeless children. I had a bill that got through the Senate 34-0 for homeless children, a coordinator in our bigger counties. Passed the Senate, the House didn't, to my knowledge, take it up. I'll be pushing that. We have thousands of homeless children out there. They're going to live in our communities. They're going to grow up, and they're going to either be productive or they're not. So to me, that's a priority. I have a bill that, a couple bills that will never see the light of day. One is for term limits. Got a lot of positive feedback on that. Everybody's for it until it applies to us. So I'd like to see term limits move. That bill will drop the first day. I have a constitutional amendment proposal for medical cannabis. Have it every year. I think Ohio is about as red as you get. Ohio adopted that. Let our voters take a look at that and see what they think of it. If they want it, fine. If they don't want it, that's fine too. Don't imagine there'll be much movement on those two. Finally, I'll say that what I hear in my district the most is the rising cost of utility bills. And where I live, well, the whole state for that matter, our utility bills are rising faster than any state in the country. Our water bills are the highest. I have a bill to elect the members of the Public Service Commission. Is that a panacea? No. But it's a step in the right direction. Other states do that. There'll be transparency and there'll be accountability. And the Public Service Commission, and I know two of those members well, and they're fine people and smarter than me and have great years of service to our state. But frankly, the way it's set up, that sort of would appear they're rubber stamping every application for higher rates. Our seniors on fixed incomes, our young couples, our single mothers cannot afford that. So we've got to work toward what we can do to lower utility bills or at least stop the rise in utility bills. And for us to think that we're going to cut my taxes, yeah, I benefit a hell of a lot from an income tax cut. We're going to cut the taxes for the donor class. We're going to cut the taxes for the high earners? Really? No. Somebody asked me the other day in an interview, and then I'll wrap it up. Mike, what's the biggest surprise? You've been here 11 years. What's your biggest surprise? My 12th session. Well, when I came in, the Democrats had run this place, and you look at the last 12 years before I came in, and guess what? The Democrats put us 48th or 49th in everything that matters, and first or second or third in the bad stuff. And lo and behold, if I looked at that previous 12 years, the Democrats did that. And here we are now, and we're at the same damn place. We're 47th, 48th, 49th, or 50th in what we'd like to see, the good things we'd like to see happen. And we're still at the bottom, obesity, healthcare outcomes. Everybody in this room knows those topics that we're good in and we're bad in. That's what we should focus on. I'd really like to see us work on that this session. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Delegate Hornbuckle here. And very, very appreciative of the Senator's words just now. And always amazed by the speakers, his agenda, and what he talks about and how he talks about it. But I'm also sitting at a little bit of a disadvantage, as you very well know, going behind those two folks. Obviously, my elder and Senator Woelfel, and the man to my left who controls the agenda. I'd like to get some things put on there. Again, good afternoon, and I'm gonna go a little bit off script. I'm gonna go a little bit off script. Simply put, some of those things that I was going to talk about were already mentioned. But the senator mentioned one thing that was very key. You know, took some accountability. He talked about years before when the Democrats ran the place that we were in the 40s, right? We have to take that accountability. We also know in the past 10 years, while Republicans have held control, we're now 50th in job growth and first in population decline. And so the story of that is we both have our hands on that. But I would be remiss if I didn't say that I think that is a byproduct of not working together. Having it your way or the highway, and folks thinking that they have a monopoly on all the ideas, and it never works out that way. And so the first thing that I think that we have to make a concerted effort this legislative session is making sure that we're doing best by the people first. Make sure we're doing best by the people first. Last year, a little bit before this time, and technically I guess it was 2024 in November, I talked to my caucus about let's be with the public more, let's be with the people more. And that eventually evolved to months later, us starting our kitchen table tour. And we went all around the state. Southern Coalfields, Eastern Panhandle, Northern Panhandle, Central West Virginia, down in our neck of the woods. And we actually got to have real conversations with real people. And part of our agenda, which again is just that kitchen table agenda, is prioritizing what affects all of us. What affects all of us? And number one on that for us, and the senator touched on it, they are utility bills. I do not care if you're making $20,000, $50,000, or you're a part of the elite. We lead the country in utility costs. And so we desperately have to do something about that. Last year we had bills that were to address that. First one was freezing utility rates temporarily so that we could look for policy fixes. That is something that is wildly important to us, and we want to do that again. We also want to make sure that we can reform the Public Service Commission and making sure that they are being true to the people first. That is also important. And finally with that, we also want to look to what some other red states have done and having a true all of the above energy approach. That is the only way that residents of West Virginia are going to see relief with their power bills. It is literally the only way. You know, something else that, you know, as we traveled across the state, and it's in different spots, but it's really prevalent in the Southern Coalfields. In 26, it is unacceptable that we still have fellow West Virginians that don't have clean drinking water. It is unacceptable. Now that is a myriad of factors that goes into that. Wow, how we've gotten to this point. But folks, and again, I appreciate jobs and other efforts that we will make. But if our neighbors can't have clean drinking water, I don't think there's anything else more important than that. If you're not healthy, you can't get to that job interview of these new jobs that could maybe come trickling in. You are not able to be healthy enough to take your kids to hopefully some decent child care in what we desperately need to work on. Speaker talked about it earlier. One word that really rang to me was fundamentals. That is a fundamental of life. And it's past time that here in West Virginia that we take care of our own. So that is top on our priority list along with utility bills. And I also mentioned child care. I know we've done some things, and I think this session we'll see even some more bipartisan works and efforts to fix that. Because we desperately need to do that, and that's a bigger part of the economy cog right there as well. Education. Last year I had a piece of legislation, we'll run it again. It's called a fair share bill. You know, it takes two to tango, right? We've got two parties up here, and right now, Republicans are in control. And several years ago, we started the HOPE program. But what we have found is that it is unintended consequences, I would say, and I hope, but it's a fact that it's hurting our public education system. We have millions and millions of dollars of your dollars, taxpayer dollars, that are leaving our state. I think, my caucus thinks, that at the bare minimum, we need to be keeping West Virginia taxpayer dollars within the state to those schools. We also know that it's not a fair system, right? We want to make sure if you are taking part of that program, that you have to pay your fair share into the extracurricular activities at those public schools, whether it be glee club, show choir, volleyball, baseball, basketball, Lego club. We want to make sure that you're doing that. It has also caused us stress on some of our teachers that are in special education. Little known fact, a lot of those teachers that are in our public education system that are with special education, they have to leave their school, go to the private schools to render that service, and they're still getting paid less. And we all know that there are closures every single year. There are school closures every single year. And so we have to fight to reverse that. When it comes to the economy, our economic conference, our budget, all right? We have to find a way to get revenue. We've cut and cut and cut, and I know the governor has proposed more cuts, but we can't keep providing for our people to be able to do that. We can't be stabilized if we do that. So I do believe that we have to work together to look at revenue enhancement measures. One thing that I think should squarely be on the table, and I know that the senator said it won't see the light of the day, but it is adult use cannabis. That's not a silver bullet, it's not. But one thing it does speak to is extra revenues that could help with things like failing infrastructure. They could help to boost teachers' pay raises. They can speak to PEIA, which we have still not discussed fully like we should. You know, my governor talks about the backyard brawl. Every other state's leaving us behind on these measures. It's time we fight. And we gotta get serious. And we gotta make sure we're doing every single thing possible to push our state forward. I talked about, again, the PEIA. We also know that what happened at the federal level, we can't hide it. We need to be responsible. I always talk about being the conscious of the house, being the adult in the room. We're going to see issues with our healthcare. We're going to see issues with our healthcare. It's not just going to be folks that are on Medicaid. If we keep going through this thing, we're going to have serious problems. And so I think we have to also be cognizant of that. And in leaving today, before we have questions, you know, I've like the speaker thanking on the way up here, and we need to do better by our people. Just period, point blank. Policy is policy, but we also know earlier this week we had a tragedy in our country. We had a tragedy in Minnesota. And I want to point that out because, you know, I have friends across the aisle. I have friends on both edges of the parties, independents. But folks, as humans, we have to stop with the political bantering. We all saw what happened. And if we allow that sentiment to do mental gymnastics, then we're stuck here. That we literally cannot work together to promote good policy for the people if that is our mindset. When something like that happens, that we're not just going to speak to an issue. And that is a barrier, as much as you might not see it, to pushing West Virginia forward if we're thinking in those ways. So I would just like to remind all of us as legislators, media, the public, to do better and call things for what they are. And let's stand together to push the state of West Virginia forward together. Thank you all.
Good afternoon. I think it's afternoon now, isn't it? I'm Senator Amy Grady. I'm chair of Senate Education, so I bet you guys can guess mostly what I'm going to talk about is education. So before I move on to talk a lot about education initiatives and priorities for this year, I want to mention also some of the things that the speaker said, Delegate Hornbuckle said, and that Senator Woelfel has mentioned when it comes to child welfare reform and job creation, tax cut proposals, and pay raises for our public employees are all, I think, things that the Senate will also see as priorities. I want to focus a lot on education because I feel like, number one, that is where my heart is, but is also education is what feeds everything in our state. So we heard the speaker talk about diversifying our economy, creating jobs, providing a more educated workforce for those jobs. That all starts with our education system. And so what we need to really focus on is diversifying our education in West Virginia. There was a time that the high school diploma really had a lot of value. And I feel like we're at a point where a high school diploma right now doesn't have the same value that it had back in the 70s, back in the 80s, back in the 90s. And there's a couple of reasons for that. You know, we have students that are graduating high school that still can't read on a third grade level. We have students graduating high school with credentials or credits that they had to take that they're never going to use in a job. They're never going to have to use whenever they are in the workforce because our high school credits, our graduation requirements, are geared towards students who are all going to go to a four-year institution. The graduation requirements that we have for our high school students are assuming every one of those students is going to a four-year institution. And the reality is many of them aren't. Many of them want to go right into the workforce. Many of them want to go into a two-year program. Many of them want to go into a technical college. And we are not providing them opportunities in high school by requiring them to take a lot of classes that they aren't going to use. And so one thing that I would like us to focus on this legislative session is revisiting those graduation requirements and revisiting the credentials that we have for a diploma. Look at more credentials of value. Allow for more flexibility in the pathways for graduation, looking at students who maybe want to go right into the workforce, what kind of classes, what kind of accreditation, what kind of credentials can they get while they're in high school, so when they graduate, they have some of the skill set that these employers out here are looking for, and they can go right into the workforce and provide for their families and also fulfill these roles and these new jobs that we're bringing in with economic development in West Virginia. The number one thing we want to do with economic development is make sure that we are employing West Virginians. And our students coming out of high school that don't want to go to college, those jobs should be for them, but we need to prepare them for them. So, touching on workforce, economic development, I wanted to talk a little bit about the graduation requirements and making sure that we have our high school students prepared. I know the senator from Cabell, I think he escaped us. No, he's back there hiding, I see him. And Delegate Hornbuckle talked about our education system. They didn't specifically say that, but how we're like 48th in the nation. And what are we doing to improve that? You guys remember, I think a couple of years ago, we passed the Third Grade Success Act. And when we passed that bill that was written based on Mississippi's version of their literacy bill, the main component of that that's different is the fact that we employ instructional aides in the classroom instead of reading specialists like Mississippi did. That was a way for us to implement it with less cost. And I would love to be able to figure out if we can get reading specialists in each district to also add to that. That's going to cost a little bit of money, but I think that's important. But anyway, when we were talking about the Third Grade Success Act, we said it's going to be 6, 7, maybe 8 years before we see a huge turnaround. And I want to add a little context to that. I've been kind of tracking this because I have a third grade daughter who's in third grade, and her class is the first class this was truly implemented with in first grade. So, I teach, I don't know how many of you know that, but I teach fourth grade, and I watch every single year the students that come into my classroom, and I get to compare them to the students from before. Watching these students that have gone through just these 3 years of implementation, I will tell you, personally, I've seen a big difference. We are looking at our test scores, which are those diagnostic tests, those benchmark tests that we're giving, and the department will report that they are seeing a lot of improvement from points that we were about 4 or 5 years ago to now. And so we'll continue to see that improve, and I am really optimistic that West Virginia will not be 48th for much longer. Another thing that I want to talk about with education we've had mentioned several times is the school aid formula. And those 3 words are so easy to say. But when you really look at what you're going to do to change that, it's not as easy as it sounds, okay? There are a lot of components. There are a lot of easy ways we could change it. There are some hard ways we could change it. Everybody has their own idea, and I want to let you guys know something will come out of this legislative session. I wish I could stand here and tell you I know exactly what that is, but you guys all know from day 1 to day 60, you never know what's going to happen. There are a lot of bills that I've seen been introduced by members that address it in one way or the other. What we have that comes out will be, I guess we'll just have to wait and see. That will be one of those pieces of the puzzles that we're really not sure about. One thing, though, personally, that I think could help, we see counties that have an increased number of special education students. And what we know about that is when you have special education students, the cost to educate that student is higher than educating a student that does not have an IEP. And also, whenever you go along with those special education students with IEPs, there are also different levels there. So you might have a student with an IEP who has ADHD. The cost to educate those students aren't necessarily that much more than a regular student who's in a regular classroom all the time. But then you have severely disabled students who do cost 5, 6, 7 times more than other students. And so we have to take that into consideration as well when we have counties that have a lot of students that are enrolled in special education programs. I've talked to a lot of teachers. I typically don't listen to teachers' organizations very much because I have my own contacts within the school system. I work there, I live there, it's my job, it is my livelihood, it's my life. So I talk to people every single day. And I'll tell you the number one thing, which sounds like a really small issue that teachers talk about, besides the behavior of students is so much different now. We tried to address that last year. I think that bill being implemented will really, really help. There's still a long way to go there. But the required number of days or hours that we need for professional development with teachers. Do you guys realize how much time teachers have without students that they actually get to work on providing and planning for quality instruction? In my county, any day we have had without students so far has been a planned day where we have had to listen to a presenter or find some sort of professional development. And I know that's the same in other counties. Teachers are frustrated. We want to provide the best instruction we can for our students, but we need the time to be able to plan to do so. A few years back, I talked about the importance of revisiting looking at a 4-day school week. Counties have the opportunity to do that right now. We would like to provide a little more flexibility for counties to decide what their school day looks like. This would also provide flexibility for teachers, allowing them a little more time for like prep periods, a little more planning time. Quality instruction is more important than the quantity. Because a lot of times what we hear is, well, we have 180 days that we need to be in school, and if we take some of those days away, then our kids aren't going to get smarter, right? It's going to be, our education system's going to get worse. Just because we're in school more days does not mean that that instruction is quality instruction. If we have shorter amount of days, or even we go to hours, there's a possibility that we could see some growth because teachers have the ability to provide more planning for quality instruction. And that's one thing we're visiting as well, to look and see if we can change that 180-day arbitrary number to maybe a number of hours and allow counties to decide how long that school day is. I think that would help a lot of our teacher burnout as well. One other thing that I do want to talk about with economic development, the House talked about how they wanted to make sure that we had workforce education, right? So a few years ago, I watched a presentation from a principal at a school in Frederick, Maryland. They have a program where they bring businesses from the counties, their districts, into the high school to provide opportunities for students to participate in apprenticeship programs or to just explore career options that are available to them. Many of them had no idea what was available in their area. And so it's a business and education partnership. We have some of those in West Virginia, just not enough. We need to really invite our businesses into our schools, specifically our middle schools and high schools, so they can talk to students and start recruiting for their businesses and keeping our students at home in West Virginia. Our greatest export is not coal. Our greatest export is our students. Once they graduate from high school or college, a lot of times they leave West Virginia and they don't come back. A lot of times they leave West Virginia and they realize that West Virginia is not as bad as they thought it was, so they do want to come back, and that's what we want them to do. But we need to provide them opportunities and give them the guidance that they need in high school to make that decision, and allowing businesses to come in and provide them with just like different types of apprenticeship programs, different types of job opportunities, I think will really, really help them. So we need to focus a lot on keeping our students here post-graduation, and I'm going to let you guys sit on that for a little bit. If you have any questions for me here in a little while, I'll answer them, but I'm going to give up on the education talk because I can stand up here all day, but I'd like to give Senator Tarr a few minutes to talk as well, okay? So thank you very much.
I'm Senator Tarr. Before I get started, I just want to express to all of my colleagues up here just gratitude for the service they have done over the years to get us to be able to build upon what's happened already. And it's been a collective effort across the legislature. And so I want to go over a few things that, just to mention that what we get to build upon at this point. If y'all ever had kids and you go on a long trip and you're driving, you start hearing, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Hey mom, are we there yet? Dad, are we there yet? You see the landmarks, you know how long you're going along across the way. So for me, when I hear about what do we need to do and how do we get there, one of the things you really have to focus on is what landmarks have we got to cross so far that really matter. And so I want to talk a little bit about those landmarks. One is our pension system. Is that right now our pension system is super funded on most of the majority pensions, really except for teachers, and it's the teacher retirement system, and it's at 83% plus funded. And why is that important? It's stability in your tax base. Because there are states, Kentucky's one of them right across the river here, that where the retirement system's so upside down that when businesses look at locating, they know that if you can't afford your pension system, that you're going to have to go and increase taxes. And so one of the things that's been a collective effort, and actually I have to give the Democrats credit, before we came in the majority, they started that. We've been super funding pensions along the way to get it there. And we do that all the way till about 2030, 2035, and that somewhere in that window to where those are 100% funded. That means everybody would have to retire at once. And then you could pay for all those pensions if everybody retired at once. That's what 100% funded means. So that's stability in an economy when you look at it at a state level. Something else that superfunding means is, well, how much are we superfunding it? Because once it's paid off, how are you paying for it? And then what's that mean on the revenue picture? We pay almost $400 million a year superfunding pensions. Once that's at 100%, no, we don't have $400 million expense anymore we're paying to that. That's coming up rapidly. Something else to go back and look at is what we've done with regards to taxes were mentioned, and had an awful lot of respect and admiration for my colleague back here, Senator Woelfel, and I appreciate the shout out on the funding formula. I would give pause personally on messing with that as well and really getting out ahead of our skis more than we already have on the income tax reduction. There are areas where we can go in and do tax reduction. I would point across the river to Kentucky, who put in some triggers that were more politically controlled than economically controlled, and now they're upside down and they're having to go back in and dip into the rainy day fund to make up for their budget outgrowing their revenue. So we are not positioned in that way in West Virginia. It's very, very stable at the point it is. Something else that I would point out that we've been able to do over the past few years that really matters with regards to infrastructure. Prior to at least the time that I got to come in for the time that I started in as finance chair, the largest appropriation that we could find from general revenue to secondary roads was $12 million. Over the past, since about 2021, we've appropriated over $800 million from the General Revenue Fund into secondary roads in West Virginia. That's real infrastructure. In addition to that, we've made an awful lot of contribution. I don't even have the number on this to go in to develop sewer and water. Now, and it's historic, sewer and water development, especially in the sewer plants. One of the things you have to realize, though, we have 1.7 million plus people in West Virginia. We have about 700,000 taxpayers. So I want to talk about how important the job side is. If you go and you look and see how many people are actually turning in and that they're turning in something for income tax. We have about 700,000 people paying income tax, supporting 1.7 million people, and a declining, over decades, infrastructure, sewer, water, roads, that is in the billions of expense if you were to flip the switch and say it's all repaired right now. So we're getting there, is what I'm telling you from the things that have happened. Economic development side of things, we've had historic investments in West Virginia just in the past few years. And one of the things I would tell you is look and see how long it takes when you get those size investments to turn into revenue for the state. 2 years ago, we had an announcement from Nucor. It's a $3 billion project. They're still building, guys. So you've got the construction jobs. But what you don't have is you don't have all that employment that follows that, and then all the housing that comes behind it, because they're the employed, they can pay for houses, they can pay for their cars, they can shop at the grocery stores, and all those things that build an economy. So what I would say, what I would encourage our caucus to do, and I'll tell you that the Senate Republican majority has not caucused on an agenda at all coming up into this session. So, I expect a bit of a free-for-all because that's extremely odd, and I'm frustrated by that, and I'll say that publicly. So that there should be, to the point before, a collective effort where we get together and we sit down and as a Republican majority between the House and the Senate and the governor's office sit down together as bodies and say, here's the problems, here's the solutions, and here's how long we're going to have to stick to those solutions. So my personal focus is what I'll speak to a little bit. Coming into this session, learned a lot from last session, kind of sitting back watching. If you kind of noticed there, I sat back in the corner and ate a lot of popcorn during the session, watched the show. So I'm looking to see how things were going. And what, personally, what I think we need to do within, aside from implementing some leadership activity in the Republican majority, is get back to a real focus on what's got us to these landmarks that we have been passing. The infrastructure investment, the tax reductions, and something I didn't mention there too is on the tax reduction side, we reduced income taxes about 24%, and it's only down 1% compared to last year. We're going to have about $250 million in surpluses this year, not counting what will come off lottery surplus, which is probably another $135–140 million. So those dollars, in spite of going through and doing the tax cuts, do provide opportunities to address that safety net population Senator Woelfel spoke of to some extent. It gives us the ability to address infrastructure to some extent. But what it doesn't do is give us to the billions that it needs to happen. That takes stick-to-itiveness, I guess is the way to put it, to what we've been doing. Get us competitive for tax base, get us the jobs here, and then capitalize in a very wise way on those jobs. And so one of my efforts here will be getting us back to working on personal property taxes, which is what we should have done right off the bat. I'll be talking to the members of the body as much as I can about how important it is that we start working on getting West Virginia competitive in a situation where we do not penalize with our tax code productivity, which is what personal property tax does. It penalizes investment in West Virginia. Income tax penalizes working in West Virginia. There's a better way to do it. We need to get back to that. The other thing I would say is we need to continue protecting our legal climate. Is that this past session coming out of the Senate was very frustrating. I think we had about 24 causes of actions that were brought up in the Judiciary Committee and maybe sent to the floor, if I remember correctly. It's around that number. That's a real fast way to drive prospective employers away from this state prior to even knowing they were looking here. So I'll be keeping a close eye on that too, and hopefully educating members. We've got a lot of new members there. They've had 1 year. That how important it is to give a stable legal climate in a state, as well as permitting climate, as well as an infrastructure growth, as well as a tax stability growth. So those aren't exciting things, but I tell you what, it's exciting when your kid gets to stay in West Virginia. And those are the kind of things that get us here. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator Tarr. We will open up the questions now. So Delegate Hornbuckle, you still have 10 minutes? You good? Okay, so anyone has anything for Delegate Hornbuckle? He does have to leave a little bit early. Jared has the microphone, so let's start right here. Here in front.
Good afternoon. Hornbuckle, you had mentioned legalization of adult use cannabis. I assume you mean recreational. I know at you're listening towards your kitchen table tour that had been mentioned, at least at the one that I had been at. This is something that your caucus has introduced in some form or another now for the past several sessions, and it's always historically been a go-nowhere bill. I think it was Delegate Hansen last year, if I'm not mistaken, used it. So I guess my question really would be more for Speaker Hanshaw. If the Democratic caucus introduces another version of this bill based on the input that they've gotten from the public that they're listening towards, would you be open to working with your caucus to get this bill considered in a committee where public could submit their comments? Obviously, we don't have the hearings anymore, but public could still get their comments submitted. Is that something that you would be open to, or would you be opposed to that?
You take it or Doug Hornbuckle take it?
Well, I guess both of you. I'd like to get both of your answers if I could.
And I'll just preface that by saying that, yes, Delegate Hansen had a bill last legislative session, as well as some others prior. I've also got a constitutional amendment that would sort of take it out of our hands and just put it to the people. But I'll just sort of leave that there.
Sure, I'll comment on it. So that bill gets introduced, and you're right, has been every year for just about as long as I've been a member of the body. It gets introduced by members of both parties. So we've had members of the Republican Party also introduce that bill. Thus far, we've just not had majority support for it. That doesn't mean we won't have at some point. I do know that there's ongoing activity, I believe, at the federal level. The president's actually acted on this recently. So what effect that has on our members, I don't know yet. We've not asked them. Historically, there have been two groups of folks who have been hesitant to move forward on that. There's one group of folks who are hesitant to move forward just on philosophical reasons. Then there's another group of folks who've been historically hesitant to move forward because they didn't want to put the state of West Virginia at odds with federal law such that there was a conflict. So I don't know where our members are today. We've not asked them since the president's weighed in on that issue. The president often moves our members. I don't know if I don't know if his opinion will have an effect this year or not. I've not asked them.
Steve.
This is probably a question for Senator Tarr, but anyone can weigh in on it. It's a two-parter. First of all, you may know the number off the top of your head, but where are we at, give or take, on our natural tax collection growth? Is it still around 3 percentage points or 3%? Or is that usually?
It's about 3%, yeah.
Okay.
We're just probably a little bit past 3%. That's why you got the surplus you see now.
Okay. Then the question for that is, when you were Senate Finance Chair and we were doing the special session where former Governor Justice wanted the 5% tax, obviously, a 2% tax instead of 5%, and then of course the trigger mechanism. That way, it would go into effect should there be a trigger 2 calendar years later. So, also when Governor Morrissey took office, he had said that we didn't pay for either the 4% tax that went into effect in the trigger or the 2% tax. So now that he's presenting a 5% to 10% range for a personal income tax cut, I mean, can we, with our revenue now, do what he is talking about? I'm not necessarily asking you to say you support his mechanism, but do you think financially we could do that? So I've not seen governor's plan as far as how he intends to do that without going in and increasing a revenue source elsewhere. I don't see how you get there without putting yourself at risk. I tell you, over the past 60 years, when we put those triggers in there, there's an average growth rate of 3.6% per year. That includes the downturns in 2008 and the booms around 2019, 2018 that you can see in there. The swings, but overall it's about 3.6%. So when we put those triggers in, it essentially said that we were going to tolerate that 3% growth, and then anything that went over that went back as an income tax reduction for the long term. So if you get out and you spend at a rate greater than 3.6 per year, or you reduce beyond what we've done, then you lost that margin. At some point you end upside down unless you have revenue source increasing somewhere. Now revenue source could be increased consumer tax, which is most likely where we see it. We do have growth in our consumer sales tax. Things, as you guys know, inflation drives that up, and when inflation goes up, then taxes off consumer tax come in as well. That's probably where there's room with us, because we have also a lot of room that if we want to adjust that somehow, and I don't see an appetite for that anywhere and haven't in the past either, although we've tried it, to offset the income tax with consumer-based taxes. So I haven't seen his plan. So if he comes back and says, okay, we want to swap this out, he's got a good idea for revenue source, then look at it. But I'll reiterate, one of the most responsible things that we could do in West Virginia is to figure out how to fund counties with something else besides personal property tax. Personal property tax, we were out of step with almost the rest of the nation with what we pay on cars, inventory, machinery, and equipment. If you have to pay an extraordinary personal property tax on a robot that increases your efficiency by 40%, then you're incentivized not to increase your efficiency. And not only are you incentivized not to increase your efficiency, for having done that, we're not as competitive as somebody across the border. And there are opportunities to start working down that personal property tax and re-envision how we fund counties. So I would advise that's the path we take.
The governor will release his budget, it's like Wednesday, I believe. Are there any of, this is a question for all of you. He's also been really adamant about budget slashes. Do any of you have any initiatives that praying do not get cut from the budget, and that you, if they are, will be that you'll fight for it in the legislature?
I would say I'm not sure if it's going to reflect his sentiments. I believe that was earlier this week on CPS and that whole deal. It sort of sounded like he might be looking to cut there, and he said he was going to put it, I believe, like more on churches and nonprofit organizations, which I believe we are opposed to. I think we need a fix in the system, but just to make a cut there, I think would be highly detrimental to the people of West Virginia.
Oh, I would like to hear if there's like initiatives that you're really hoping that are, I wanted to hear all of you say like initiatives that you're really hoping to make it into the budget. If you all could. Into the budget? Yeah, into the budget. Yeah. Oh, I mean, either is also useful. So I would like to hear from all of you guys.
I don't mean this to be a flippant answer, but if we mean for them to be in the budget, they'll be in the budget.
That also works as an answer. Thank you.
All right, next question, and we'll go right back here.
Hello, I've got a two-parter for you all, and given what Senator Tarr said about there not being a Senate Republican caucus yet, I'm going to ask you guys to answer this as individuals, I think, more than a party. Senate President Randy Smith has said that he foresees at least some addressing of issues and concerns that have come up in HB 2014. Is that still a plan to be addressed? And specifically, if so, what do those conversations look like? I guess for the speaker, have those conversations happen for House Republicans, for the members of our minority party? What are your all caucuses talking about? And for the two of you, is that something that you would like to see happen in the Senate?
On House Bill 2014?
Yes.
Well, so it's only just going into effect. We haven't even had it into effect for a full year yet. So one of the things that is always necessary is you have to learn from what you did, right? So we are learning from what we've done. I don't know that we're finished learning from what we've done yet. I don't have a specific proposal that's been presented to me for changes that are either necessary or suggested there. I know we're still learning from it. That's the best I can give you. We've not been presented with a specific change to it yet.
Sure, thank you.
In 2014,
Microgrid data center.
and so I think the jury's still out, and it's not a finished product. But I know our caucus stance is we would like for some local control measures to be within that language.
I am hesitant to give a personal opinion on this, honestly, simply because we have not discussed as a caucus, and the idea and the general consensus is when we discuss as a caucus, you get a lot more information that maybe you didn't think about. So my perspective may be a little different than anybody else's, but I like to bounce things off of my fellow senators, and they may think of something different that I haven't thought of. So honestly, personally, and I hate this sounds like a politician's answer, it's not, I can see both sides of how we could change it a little bit differently or keep it how it is. So we haven't discussed it enough for me to have a deep personal opinion. Again, I'm always stuck in education world, so that's where my brain has been. But I wish I could give you a better answer, but I just don't have one.
Fair enough.
Okay.
I would advise that we stay with what it is, and I tried to amend that on the Senate floor. I think it got changed over in, actually, I think it's some of those changed in the House. And I would stand by those, except that now we've set the rules, right? So now you have people who are looking at West Virginia, playing by those rules, or budgeting by those rules, or comparing us to other states by these rules and where they might locate. And so one of the things I just mentioned at the podium is how much stability matters in a regulatory environment. So if we came right back in and started changing the rules by which they're measuring West Virginia as a place to invest this early, I think that's a terrible signal to send.
Senator Woelfel.
It's okay. I'm used to it. The law should be predictable. That's fundamental. That's the way it's always been. We have a new law. Business investors and the public need predictability. So I also would have reservations about just a knee-jerk reaction. This is a very complex issue. I wouldn't pretend to tell you that I understand it all that well, really. But I would be against just immediately jumping in there and trying to make changes when you're talking about major financial investments. Will it need to be changed? Yes. What are those changes? To be continued and studied.
Sure. And kind of on the constituent side of 2014, there's been a lot of pushback in the communities where these have been located. Governor Morrissey has classified this as a small minority of people, motivated by whatever he wants to say about it, mostly saying it's not enough that it matters. So for you all, as the people who are here representing your constituents, and I don't think there's any data centers really at any point, and maybe you, minority leader, I don't know where that line is, but I don't think there's anything proposed in any of your districts necessarily. As people who represent constituents, though, what is the amount of people that need to speak up and push against something for the legislature to reconsider a law?
I think legislators in general, we listen no matter if it's one person or thousands of people. I know personally I do. I don't care if I get one email or 1,000 emails. I'll listen to whoever takes the time to send me some concern that they have. I think part of the problem with this is there's such limited education on exactly what they do, exactly what the bill does. You know, it's so new, just like we discussed just a few minutes ago, it's so new that I think that the general public still is really kind of cautious and a little unsure of exactly what it means. And I know, in general, people in West Virginia in general, if it's something that's a change, then we're really hesitant, and we really want to just be safe and say, no, we don't need that, without really understanding all the components. And I think educating the public is the most important thing that we can do before they even can say whether or not that what their complaints are. Because I think right now we're hearing general complaints I haven't heard any personally, but I'm seeing the same thing that you were seeing whenever you see in some of those smaller communities that I've seen on the news where people are complaining about it. I wonder how much they really understand of it. So that's just my general take on it.
Can I clarify a little bit about what I meant? That is addressing the answer to the question, yes. I think more thinking about the power plant part of it, people do understand, I think, pretty well the ramifications of having a power plant in their backyard and what happens with that. So when that's what they're speaking up against, how many people does it take for that to matter? And I don't mean that to be aggressive.
Yeah, no, I don't take that as aggressive. I just think that's a hard question to answer because I don't think you can put a number on it. You know what I mean? I don't think you can say, well, it has to be this number of people before we even listen, because we are listening. It's just, is it, like, it's still new. So is that something that is going to grow? Are those numbers of people going to grow? Or is this just a small, like the governor has said, it's just a small, generalized group of people that are standing up against it? I mean, it's so hard to tell. And that's just kind of where I'm at with it. I can't give you a number. Like I said, one person, 100 people, 1,000 people will listen to them regardless. I don't know what that would be. Somebody else may, but I don't.
Any other questions? Can you please identify yourself so we've gotten away from that? It's a new panel, so.
There's some concern that the AI bubble might burst this year. If you go and read interviews with some CEOs and business analysts, that the amount of investment that's looking at moving to AI data sectors, I'm curious if the legislature would consider doing anything to make sure that state things overextend the AI case bubble burst.
Yeah, I'll take that one. The state, to the best of my knowledge, is not looking at doing any investment into AI. Full stop. I'm not aware that we've allocated a dollar to that. Maybe I'm misunderstanding your question, but we haven't, to the best of my knowledge, made an investment at all into a state data center or to an AI company.
Yeah, I'm just curious because there's obviously because you guys are talking about that law that removes local control over data centers and all that. So there's interest in that.
Well, let me reframe your question. I don't want to change your question, but let me just respond to it generally, and you tell me if I'm getting it right. So, one of the things that we know is important to the economy is that data centers for every sector of the economy get built and are getting built and are being built all over the world. There's a huge driver of that comes from companies that are in that AI space. No doubt about that. But there was also a huge driver of that sector of the economy well before that technology became the vogue, right? So I don't know that we, the state of West Virginia, have banked on AI per se, so much as we just recognize that here's a sector of the economy that supports a lot of other sectors of the economy, and we're receptive to it. I don't personally think about that conversation that we've been having as AI-centric. I know that I use my ATM card, I use my credit card from time to time, I send emails, I send text messages, as I imagine many of you do in the room, some of you probably while we were talking. Every one of those things I just mentioned flows through a data center somewhere, and none of that is connected to AI. So I've read some of that same literature. If I were an investor in the AI industry, I would would read that with interest, which is what I think you might be talking about. Am I okay?
Since he does have to go, Delegate Hornbuckle, thank you so much for your time. Other questions for the panelists? We have maybe time for one more.
Hi, my name is Samantha Smith. I'm a student journalist at West Virginia University. In last session, there were two bills that I covered very closely. One of them had a lot of debate in the Senate and the House. Should we expect anything like that regarding the university this year during the session?
I can only speak to what I have seen sent to Education Committee as proposed bills. I haven't seen anything that I would deem controversial or something that's going to have a lot of debate. I haven't seen anything. That doesn't mean that there won't be. There's always those things in the middle of session that fly out and we're kind of surprised by, but personally, I haven't seen anything when it comes to education-related things. I'm not sure about the speaker or Senator Tarr.
You know, one very important thing is a strategy that we deployed 2 years ago that I think has taken a lot of debate out of the overall realm of higher education. That's our higher education funding formula. So for years and years, we funded higher ed in West Virginia on a very political basis. So if your local college or university was well represented on one or another finance committee, you could often expect to be well funded. And that's not how we ought to run a railroad. That's not how we ought to fund our higher education apparatus in West Virginia. So we moved that to now an equation. It's now a mathematical process. It's a formula-based funding metric, just like we fund public education in West Virginia. So I'm proud of the fact that what that's done to a large extent is take the debate out of that process. It's no longer such a political animal as it once was. It's now the result of an equation. It's a very mathematical process that minimizes some of that debate and consternation that used to exist around the whole question of how do we fund higher education in West Virginia.
Senator Wolf.
Thank you. And I want to commend again the speaker for leading those efforts to make sure there's predictability and fairness in the way our colleges and universities are funded. He took the lead on that. I think part of the question, where's the questioner? I was hiding in the back there, grabbing a cookie. Was part of your question having to do with the voting for the Board of Governors?
Yes.
Okay, I want to address that because I will drop a bill that's been drafted, the first day it'll drop, to restore to the students, the faculty, and the other personnel those votes that were the legislature saw fit to take away from them. And I'll tell you why. I'm a Marshall graduate. I know Brad Smith was very adamant and motivated me to be very adamant on that issue, to preserve the input of the students, of the classified staff, and of the faculty, to have input into the major decisions made by a college or university. So if one college or university doesn't want their students to do that, to have that input, I would respect an amendment on my bill to allow somebody to opt out. But I know Marshall University and others wanted that input to be real and to be, and it was a very close vote in the Senate. I think it was a couple votes. We came up maybe 3 votes short on that issue. So I'm very, the argument was made that our students are too manipulated by those radical left-wing hippie beatnik teachers that manipulate their minds. Have you met our college students? Are you serious? I'm going to walk in a classroom and tell you how to think. Where do you go to school? And I'm going to come up to WVU and I'm going to manipulate your little female mind into thinking the way I can think. It's never going to happen. Plus, most of our students are more conservative than I am, and I'm a fairly conservative guy. So our students aren't naive. They're smart as hell, and they are not going to be manipulated into anything. And if you think they are, you need to get on a college campus. So you can tell I'm pretty animated and enthusiastic about restoring those rights. And I'd be glad if WVU, which is the impetus of that bill really was coming out of there. If they want to, change that and not choose to empower you as a student, let them do that. That's fine. But I know Marshall University wants to restore those privileges, and we're going to fight about that.
Well, with that, it is 2 o'clock, and we don't want Senator Woelfel from his cookies provided by the olive tree. So we will go ahead and break. I want to thank our panelists today for their time and candidness. Wish them well this session.